Okay, so let's take a look here. I noticed this hand while I was organizing stuff. 3-bet button versus small blind. Pretty standard pre-flop. I think this is small betting, small C betting kind of board, not pure probably, but he may do this with range. Rig deck is probably mixing, still probably decent frequency raise here, and I think the opponent is gonna call the flop pretty pure. Now rig deck is probably just gonna still want to bet the turn here. And the slow play makes a lot of sense here. The real question for me was about the river here. Is rig deck allowed to shove this for value purely? Yeah, it's about half of the pot left, so maybe it is. But I was just wondering, because the king hit, like his opponent may not re-raise all the ace kings on the flop. He may still have pocket kings, and then of course there are the flushes. So I was wondering if the ace 8 is required to sometimes even check back the river, if it's mixing or if it's a pretty easy shove. So let's dive into the solver to check that out. I went with GTO Wizard Research Preflop Solutions and then did an AI solve. Already put in their flop bet and raise sizes. It's indeed a 50-50 mix for the C betting strategy here for the king queen of hearts, which is also about 50-50 here to C bet. The solver was betting a little smaller. It's indeed a small C betting type of board. For raising to 21, the ace 8 is indeed mixing, mostly raising. And I thought it was a pure call, which is not the case. He can absolutely shove with this one. Alright. Yeah, it makes sense, of course. He wants to shove a bunch of ace kings and whatnot, and then, you know, what better equity kind of draws will we have than these king high flush draws, right? Other than the straight draw. How do you say, the combo draws here, of course. These are really high equity draws to shove with, so it does make sense that these go with it as well. And rig deck bet 26. Now often on these flush boards I do think the solver is you know, mixing strong hands, and you see him you know, mixing a bunch of flushes, but not the ace 8. I guess it's just like really wants to bet and get value from, like, slow playing is not so attractive, right? We want to protect and get value from flush draws and whatnot, or ace X and name it, even though these kinds of flushes, they are more or less invincible, and so these don't mind slow playing to try to get the stack on the river or whatnot. So the ace 8 is actually pure betting indeed. And king queen of hearts is in fact pure slow playing on the turn, even though the 10-9 of hearts is then shuffling. Well, that makes sense. Then we go to the spot that I was curious about, the ace 8. Okay, so interestingly we see that rig deck opponent, that the small blind is actually donk shoving a whole lot, and that's gonna be quite important. And I do think the ace 8 is at least close to checking back or maybe mixing. So let's take a look if that's actually the case. And yeah, the ace 8 is indeed mixing. His ace 8 is about 50-50. However, I do think some players may under donk shove here. We can see here he's supposed to donk shove 25% of the time. If we remove that, the ace 8 without a doubt becomes, yeah, a pure check, and it would not even be close. So yeah, assuming the small blind plays you know, a solid donking strategy, then rig deck's decision with the 2 pair is still a pretty strong hand on the river, right? Is actually close, but because the king hits a lot of the small blinds hands that the rig deck doesn't really have, like ace, king and pocket kings. That's it for this video. Hope you liked it, and see you in the next one.